Hi, it's Mike at Balsamiq. I'm going to do a wireframe to propose a design iteration for a feature in Cloud. We provide checkboxes so that you can perform actions on multiples or a single project in the space. So let's take a look at that and let's get started. Okay, so now we're looking at Cloud, and what we're going to be redesigning is the checkbox actions that you get when you're either in the list view or the grid view of projects. So if you are here in list view or here in grid view, when you click the checkboxes, you have a couple available actions on those selected projects. You can download them or you could delete them. So the problem is that we have two different kind of views here. We have a list view and we have a grid view, and the actions are pretty subtle and hidden. If I check something here, and you look up in the upper right corner, you see that the actions appear here, and it's not very visible. So we need to make it a little bit more obvious to people where to look. So that they can perform an action on a single or multiple project. So I had a couple different ideas that I had just scribbled some notes for, and the first is that we could just sort of point out where the actions are. It could be just sort of a little change in state, so that these icons are our attention goes to this area. The second is more of a modal toolbar, where if you selected a project, then this toolbar that we call the app bar gets taken over by a more visible changed state, where you can see that this is where you should look, and the the checkboxes will appear there. I mean, the icons to perform an action will appear there. And the last one, it was just kind of a another idea, which is to slide in or slide up an action bar below or right above the list or the grid, so that it would just kind of appear in between the grid. I didn't really love that idea, just because I didn't want things to get covered or to move around. So what I'm going to do is just kind of explore a couple of these ideas, and the one that I like the most, I think, is this behavior that's kind of familiar if you use like a mobile device like an Android, and there's this material design convention of taking over the toolbar area and showing an action there. So let's create a new project. I am in our Balsamiq space, and I'm going to create a new project for Cloud project actions, I'll call it. Okay, so I kind of like to start with little thumbnail sketches. So I'm holding the R key down here, and I'm just going to draw a couple little representations of the screen. So this is the screen within toolbar, and in that little toolbar area is where we're going to have the actions, but I'm going to work with the grid view to begin with. So I'm just going to make a couple boxes that represent projects, and I'm going to put a little checkbox. Let's see. I'm going to put a little checkbox with each of these grid items. So I just want a little tiny representation of a project. I should just done it this way. Okay, so I want to make a little, here, I'm going to group this. I want to make a little representation of the grid view here. This view should perform pretty much the same way, I think. So I'm just going to do this for now. So this is a little, it's a little representation of what the grid view should look like. What else should I put in here? So our grid view has, there's a little area. I'm going to take a look at this real quick. There's a little area at the top left that has your, the site name, your space name, and then there's a menu. But there's a bunch of stuff that's not necessarily relevant to what we're wireframing here. So I'm just going to put some scribbly stuff around here just because I know that that's part of where we're looking. And then the last thing is this white space here, this empty space, which is going to then be filled by the icons. So I'm going to group this. So let's look at, I'm going to think about concept 1 here. I'm just going to put a title here so you know what I'm thinking, what idea I'm thinking through. So this is concept 1, which is some sort of it's not an alert, but it's some sort of identifier or notification that you should look in this area of the page. So I'm just going to call it this for now. Concept 2 is going to be this is going to be sort of that material design, this modal toolbar. I'm going to call it that. I'm not really sure if that's the right name for it. Concept 3 was going to be some kind of slide in toolbar that would appear above the grid, right? So let's just explore these 3 different ideas. Just gonna kind of give each of these so just holding Option and dragging that. So I'm gonna give each of these little thumbnail sketches a starting point here, and the next step is that so just going to take 1 or 2 of these and check them. So I'm going to change this state to selected. Let's just do 2 of them so it's obvious. And we'll do, all right, so I'm going to make 2 of these checkboxes selected, right? So what happens now in this, well, in every one of these cases, you get 2 different icons that will appear. And you have sort of a download icon, I think, like this. I don't know if exactly this is what we have, but I'm going to use this one. Make that a little tiny thing. All right, so we had you get an icon to download and an icon to delete, which is some kind of a like, let's make it that one for now. Okay, and they're really subtle, but in every case, when you check the boxes, you have the possibility of deleting or downloading. So in this first case, the idea I was thinking of was, maybe there's some change in state here where these icons in the page are, they're this really subtle white on the dark gray. We could do something like change the color to something a little bit more noticeable and then fade that out, or we could just put a little toast, or not a toast, but maybe like a tooltip in that area that says something like perform actions on, you may perform actions on these checked items or something. So there's one idea. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. And then, there might be some kind of, transition, some transition from, this to the regular state. And I'm going to, I would communicate what that is supposed to look like. So this is just for me. I'm just trying to figure out the idea first. Second idea would be to do that modal toolbar. So once you've selected these 2 items, this bar at the top, the idea I was thinking of was that, this bar changes state so that you're going from, actually in this case, you're going from something like a darker, like a gray, to something that's more like our primary action color that we use, which is this blue, throughout the site. And maybe we remove the two areas of the toolbar where there's the space name and the the menus, and we put a cancel link in there or something to let you back out of that action. So let's see, I'm just gonna make it a white piece of text. So let's see, this is just gonna say cancel. Alright, so I just added a little bit of text to cancel out of this action. We could also have some text here that says perform actions on these items, or I'm not really sure we need to do that, but let's just do this for now. So this is the the second state where the toolbar is sort of made a little bit more prominent, and then you'll notice that the actions are available here, and you perform the action, and then we go back to, let's say you deleted. Let's do that. So let's just kind of make this like a little storyboard. So let's say that I deleted these two, then after this deletion, we might have a confirmation thing. So are you sure you want to delete this because that's a destructive action? So actually let's go through that whole process. So I clicked this delete icon, let's say, and then let's have some way of confirming this is what you want. So this is kind of like our OK cancel dialog. Like, really delete these? Do you really want to delete these? I don't know. Let's just say that, and then there's some buttons that say yes or no, and one's yes, one's cancel. And then I don't know, let's just say yes and no in this case. And this is going to be, I don't know, I want to make it really, just kind of obvious that this is a destructive action, and there's a plane flying over me, so let that fly by. What is it, Fleet Week? It's a loud plane. Okay, so all right, so I have this confirmation that you're actually going to delete it, and then the next state here, let's put this. I like to kind of make it, when I wireframe, I like to just kind of go through the flow and use these little cursors to point out that I'm gonna make this a pointer though, so it's a little bit stands out. So it's obvious, like in this little storyboard, that the user's taking an action here. He's clicking this icon. Sorry, getting notified of something up behind me. So the user's taking an action here, and then let's see what happens here as we go back to this regular screen, and then 2 of those projects have been removed. All right. So this is kind of where I am. So we should maybe put some. Sorry, I'm thinking through this too. Maybe so. I'm thinking through how to communicate this. I mean, the point of this, doing these wireframes, is to, to explore the ideas, figure out what you want to do, but also part of it's you gotta, you want to communicate the idea to your team, whoever's going to be take part in the decision-making process here. So, I want to illustrate to the audience of this thing, when I give this walkthrough of these different ideas, I want to sort of illustrate what's happening. Like, what's the action that's being taken? What's the flow that what's the result of the action? So we tend to draw these boxes and arrows to indicate flow, and then we have to, at some point, we have to actually go through this flow with somebody. But it always helps to have these little illustrations of the action, I think. So I put them in. So here's little arrows pointing to what happens next. I gotta turn that phone off. I mean, it's obvious what's happening in this case. Maybe it's not. I mean, it'll be obvious once I start talking through it to whoever is gonna listen to me. It's really noisy today. All right, so I might add, with a storyboard, you also add some kind of caption, so I might add some text here. I'm just really kind of figuring this out as I'm going right now, but I might just start to put in some notes that I'll use, when I do the walkthrough, or also that people can look at if I'm not doing the walkthrough in real time, and then maybe there's some asynchronous work where I'll say, can you review this? And then overnight, if my team is in Italy, they'll look at it, and then we'll come back and do the walkthrough together afterwards. So it helps to have some notes. So this is user selects one or more items, one or more projects, and then let's see. Action icons appear with tooltip and color state changes. So maybe it's just something as simple as that in my notes. And then, I'll come back and I can add more notes to make this more clear before, doing a walkthrough. And then here, let's see. I might copy these two. Let's just duplicate this, and then okay. So I'm going to say action type. All right. So toolbar. Toolbar changes to show actions. And that's not well worded, so I'll probably improve that. Just gonna make those reversed. Let's select this icon, make that white. So if you want to select something behind an object, so like this modal layer is in front, you can right click on it, and then you have options to select the objects behind. Oops, I selected the wrong one. So I'm selecting this icon, which is kind of cool because it tells you the color of the icons. And I knew that was the black one I wanted to change. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put in some more notes. Confirmation dialog for action. I don't think that's necessary for download, so just for the delete action. So download should just download. We'll do a little bit better notes for that. And then projects deleted. You don't need more confirmation than that, probably. Anyways, this is a start, and this is the same here. So I'm going to copy that. Copied something here. Oh, those are the white icons. Don't need that. So let's see. All right, so kind of doing a lot of wonky stuff here. So it's not, it doesn't have to be super clean, but for me, this is how I start with wireframing. I start from this sort of really high level view of like what are the states of this, if this is going to be some kind of function that changes some state in the screen. What are the state changes here, and how do I figure out how to communicate that, provide feedback, and then show the actions for this workflow. So that's pretty much what I'm doing here at a high level with these thumbnail sketches. I don't really need to go into very great detail about what the controls are going to be, or anything in particular yet. So I'm just going to start with that, and then I'll come back, maybe just to review these first, and then go back and then explore the finer details after that. Now I'm going to do this concept where the user is going to select the projects, and then we're going to slide in the actions toolbar above the grid. It could also be something that overlays the grid, or if we have this, you have a small bit of empty space here. It could slide up from the bottom of the viewport. It could slide down over the toolbar, which is not really different from the second concept, so that doesn't seem like a great idea. Or it could just kind of get inserted in between here in this space. But I'm really not loving that idea, so I'm not sure if I wanted to do that. So so I'll just, it's easy to just throw this idea away if I don't love it. But the idea would be, maybe we have some kind of text that's, do we need to label it? I don't know. So if we have these two icons here, let's copy these two. If we have these two, oh, we have, actually, sorry, I have my two. Okay, sorry, I have two icons already here. I'm gonna delete these. So if we have these two icons, up here, here, after you have selected the projects, then it would be obvious because everything would move, and then you would see the two actions. But I really don't love this idea. It could be done differently. It could be that there's a panel, and it doesn't. So here's another here. So let me just kind of do an alternative here. Just so I can see it. I don't know if I'm going to propose both of these. But let me just see what it might look like. If this didn't change, if this didn't change position, this grid or the list view, that would be better. I don't really want to move things around on the page, but if we had actions slide in over in a way that's just not going to take over the entire view, maybe that wouldn't be so bad. So let's just make it a little bit more realistic here. I'm going to just, make these bars look more like toolbars, just so I'm adding some other color to it. And then maybe if this action area becomes visible, I need to move this to the front. It could just slide in over the header, and then you'll be able to keep the grid where it is. But that's got other problems because no, it doesn't. This is actually fixed. I forgot. This is a fixed position header. But then if we slide over and you're checking something down here, you could obscure the other projects. It's just not a great idea. It's not a great concept. I don't know if I want to do this one, but I needed to explore it anyway. It could be something that slides up from the bottom as well. It's just I would presume that your actions are going to be taking place up here. Maybe not. Maybe you're checking something down here. It would still obscure it. So all right. I don't love this idea. I'm going to leave it in there until I do the walkthrough. I'm just going to fill in the notes. So actions slide in. So this is kind of just going to do 3.1. Action slide in over grid list view. This one, action toolbar, overlays grid list view. These are not gonna. I already know these are not good. So these have problems. So I'm not gonna go with either of these. But I wanted, it was just one of these ideas. Before I started this project, I kind of, I said I jotted down some notes, and I just kind of had, in words, I wrote down a few different ideas that might work, that I thought might be a good way to draw your attention to the actions. And this just happened to be one of them. And when I see it in real life and I walk through what would happen in the view, I can see that it's got problems. So I'm just gonna probably chuck that one and explore these two. I think this concept 2 is the one that I would argue for. And I think I'm just going to stop there, and then I'm probably going to just discuss it, walk through it with Peldy and the team, and see which one of these you want to take to the next step and explore a little bit more.